So if you somehow haven't heard, most of Southern California has been on fire for the better part of this year. And it's not because of climate change or mismanagement. It's because of a little tiny fish about the size of my pinky called the Delta Smelt. Now I should say, I am biased. I love smelts. There's a little place back home in Dallas that'll just give you a bowl of them and you can eat them like chips. But for people like Sean Hannity and the President of the United States, smelts are basically eco-terrorists, burning down our country one state at a time. The craziest thing though, is this isn't a new outrage campaign. The smelt hate has been going on for almost 2 decades. But before we talk about smelts, we need to talk about salmon. The current California wildfires have been blamed on a lot. Black people, lesbians, and of course, the bane of everyone's existence, salmon. That's because earlier this year, Governor Gavin Newsom launched a strategy for the biggest dam removal in history. This was meant to restore California's salmon population, which had been dwindling in the face of climate change. It also helped other wildlife, including the smelt. The proposal was supported by indigenous people, and experts said it wouldn't affect California's water supply. But I'm silly to think that would ever matter. Because as soon as these fires started raging, devastating millions of lives, right-wing figures blamed Newsom, indigenous people, and the salmon for what was happening. In fact, at the start of all this, Jesse Watters complained about it at length on Fox, twice, in one day. But these fishy accusations quickly evolved from salmon to sturgeon to a familiar foe, the Delta Smelt. For the past week, Trump has been attacking this fish like it's Hillary Clinton. It got name-checked in an executive order, been terrorized by Trump's allies, and he even called it worthless in a Truth Social post. We're at the point where the President of the United States is bullying a fish, and it's been 1 week. But this stuff about the smelt isn't new, not even for Trump. So how did we get here in the first place? Well, we've got to go back 16 years to 2009. I'm in 4th grade. Club Penguin is my favorite hobby. And at that point, I really thought I'd be the first female Republican president. But in California, the Delta smelt had just been listed as an endangered species, and for good reason. These little fish had been dwindled by climate change, habitat reduction, and invasive species. It's gotten so bad that in 2015, only 6 Delta smelt were netted in a biological survey. But even though they're small, about the length of a credit card, ecologists consider them as a main indicator for the health of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta region. They're kind of like canaries for the California water supply. So to stop the extinction of the smelt, California listed them as a critically endangered species under the Endangered Species Act. This meant that officials had to reduce water flow from dams when the pumps were hurting the smelt or the water got too salty. These protections, by the way, didn't only help the smelt. Like I said, they're an indicator for the entire habitat, so they were really preserving the entire ecosystem as a whole. These pumping restrictions also stopped saltwater from flooding the estuary. In case you didn't know, you can't drink or farm with saltwater, so this helped humans too. As one quote in my research said, "You can't apply salt water to farmlands. That's what the Romans did to punish their enemies." But that didn't stop water contractors, the agricultural industry, and Southern California's water district from suing federal agencies, calling these pumping restrictions arbitrary and capricious. And this is where Sean Hannity comes in. Remember, it's 2009. You can't go anywhere without seeing David after the dentist. iCarly's in its 2nd season, and also Obama just became president. So conservatives were looking for any easy shots they could take at the new administration. And the Delta smelt was the perfect target. On May 8th, 2009, Sean Hannity aired a special investigation with his future girlfriend, Ainsley Earhart.
It's fish versus families.
It really
and they're
is.
choosing the fish.
They're choosing the fish.
Yeah.
2-inch fish.
They claimed with vague sources that 37,000 jobs had been lost, that unemployment was at 40% in some California towns, and that 50,000 more jobs were on the line, all because of the Delta smelt. Well, more because liberal California was pumping our water into the ocean for no reason. I just want to reiterate, they are pumping salt water, and you cannot farm with that. Hannity mentioned this issue throughout the summer, but it culminated in a September 17th special dramatically titled "The Valley That Hope Forgot." Hannity went to the Central Valley in California to plead with Barack Obama to turn this water on now.
Barack Obama tells his environmental extremists in his administration to stand down and turn the water on. He'll get the first credit from me.
But here's the kicker. The water had been on for like 3 months. These restrictions were always meant to be temporary, only used when the natural habitat was threatened. In fact, the Interior Department estimated that only a quarter of any California water shortages that year were from the pumping restrictions. The other 3/4 were from drought. climate change.
It's fish versus family.
After his special, the Delta Smelt became a symbol for radical environmentalism and crazy liberal policies. It was elevated from a state-level culture war to a national whipping boy, all thanks to Fox's 9 p.m. hour. It also kind of revolutionized 21st century dunks on liberal policy. Like, you're protecting a little fish over your farmers? What kind of American are you? Once again, the water being pumped out into the ocean is salt water, and if you try to farm with it, your crops will die. Now, the Delta Smelt meltdown, or smeltdown, if you will, foreshadowed future manufactured outrage campaigns. Remember when everyone got upset over that shrimp on a treadmill study? When the US government spent $3 million to put shrimps on a treadmill for science, all of that anger was completely fake. Because that's not what the study was. First off, it was $1 million to the National Science Foundation, not $3 million. And they were trying to see how marine organisms can fight infection. So they put a bacterial load in the shrimp, but because shrimp are really active in the wild, they created this little treadmill from old parts. That actual part of the study only cost like $50. So no, none of this was pointless. And if you're still wondering why we should know how shrimp fight infections, I'd ask if you've ever eaten a shrimp. Gotta be real though, I think the $1 million was worth it just for this video. So just like the Delta Smelt, this fellow sea creature has been politicized beyond imagination. It's allowed important endeavors like science and not dying from climate change to be ruthlessly mocked by conservatives as pointless liberal spending. It also creates keywords that will trigger instant outrage whenever you hear them. But let's fast forward to today. It's been 16 years, and we are still talking about this fucking smelt. And that's because the only things conservatives will recycle are their bullshit narratives. So while those more recent dam measures for the salmon are still being villainized a bit, I think conservatives realized they didn't have to build a whole new evil fish narrative from the ground up. Instead, they can just reuse their old one. Or in the case of Trump, keep pushing the exact same lie he's believed for the better part of 2 decades. Because this smelt shit is not new for Trump. He's been complaining about it since his first presidential campaign. At one May 2016 rally, he insisted there's no drought in California. We just keep pushing the water out to sea. Once again, it's seawater. I dare you to drink it. When he was president the first time, Trump weakened protections for the smelt. And now we already have executive orders talking about this fish again. When I first started watching the conservative reaction to these fires and I heard about the salmon, I was like, oh, they're using the same playbook from the smelt shit like 20 years ago. It took me like a week and this Sacramento Bee article to realize, no, this isn't a bit. They're pushing the exact same story, pretending that it's existed since 2009 till now. Which, by the way, during 4 of those years, Trump was president. But it makes sense to boil this sprawling issue, most of which is related to climate change, down to one organism, and to ditch the salmon for the smelt, even though Newsom's dam measures are newer and specifically focused on the salmon. As one UC Davis ichthyologist said, salmon aren't as easy of a target. The smelt's small size, silly name, and lesser known status make it the perfect example of unnecessary or ridiculous liberal policies. And while that might sound unfair, the right never likes to pick on anyone or anything their own size. But the effect of this argument is exactly what they want: an enemy to point to. And that enemy isn't just Delta Smelt. It's anyone who cares about the climate and the people who use the water more than instant profits. But if you turn the issue into us versus them, it's easier to get people on your side. Think about how it's being portrayed to an audience that doesn't know much about California water or easily believes something that comes out of Trump's mouth. I think this LA Times op-ed from 11 years ago sums it up perfectly. In their imagined people versus fish scenario, towns are going dry and growers are going out of business because crazy environmentalists are hogging the water to protect an obscure fish. Never mind that these pumping restrictions keep seawater from going into the estuary, which once again, you cannot drink. Never mind that preserving the Central Valley's groundwater is essential to human and animal survival, especially as climate change minimizes snowmelt. And never mind that the hydrants in LA didn't go dry because of a lack of water. They were overstressed because powerful winds made aerial firefighting impossible. But no, It's all because of a fish and the climate crazies. Fascism is dependent on a scapegoat. It doesn't matter if it's the Jews, the transes, the Muslims, the blacks, or even a teeny tiny delicious fish. They will find a victim to fill that void. They need someone to keep supporters and fearful countrymen from pointing their fingers at the right culprit, the people in power. And while you might be thinking that Trump supporters in California could turn on him when their water goes dry or there are pumping issues in general because of his new disastrous policies, I can guarantee you they will find a new target. And if it's not a fish that time, don't be surprised if it's you.